welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement, getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, and Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on us authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Well, looks like I'm on. It's so good to be back and enjoy an opportunity to share a little bit of my life and my story with you. And I can't tell you just how thrilled I am to do it. I saw an opening line there in the introduction there. It says it talks to authors across the globe. Well, I'm very happy to say that's so true, because right now, for me, it is a little after 5:30 in the afternoon, and that's because I'm in Italy. I'm in a family home here. My wife was born here, up in near the Alps, and I'm sitting on the balcony of our home. I'm going to try to give you a quick, and the weather's unfortunately not the greatest, but there's some of the houses that we can see out there. We go, focusing in on some houses there. On a clear day, you would see more mountains in the background. We are up against a mountain here, and directly to my shoulder, to my right, are the Alps. We're not that far from the Alps. Get to be here. Been here for about 2 weeks. Got another week here before heading off to New York. I wanted to take this opportunity also to thank Reader's Magnet for everything they've done. They just super effort, particularly John Ocampo. Thank you, John, and Ken Bassett, my representatives that have been getting me through the last year plus of getting my book out there and known. Thank you guys so much. It's been fantastic. I would want to spend a little more time talking about myself, because that's important to understand that that is what makes up my book. I'm an engineer by education, and practicing with what we call construction management, with the latter part of my career in constructing railroads. So I like to say I build railroads. Now retired, but which is why I can spend time here in Italy. But I had a great career, and I've built railroads systems around the United States and in other parts of the world. If people might recall from last time, I mentioned that about 6-7 years ago, I lived in a country called Qatar. You know it as Qatar. and was building a subway system for as part of their infrastructure development, because next month they are hosting World Cup. And I can tell you right now that my experience in that country was absolutely phenomenal. I couldn't say more about the country, but it's also part of my book, and that my story was about a colony of a base station of about 30 astronauts that are a blend of two continents, the United States and Canada, as well as Europe. It's got joint venture between NASA, European Space Agency, also known as ESA, and it brought together people that basically the characters in my story are people I have known in my life, I've worked with, and it made it so much easier for me to write about a character in my story when it's somebody I knew and worked with and lived with and understand. So I'm very fortunate to have had these world experiences that I can that I can share in the story. And this kind of why I decided to write this book is I wanted to talk about those experiences, but not on something that would be boring, but something of interest. And it was one of the cornerstones of my decision to write the book was my experiences with people from all over the world, and I do mean from all over the world. I've got people from Czech Republic, from Greece, from Hungary, um, Italy, of course, and of course, United States, Canada. I've got other characters from Brazil. These are some wonderful people that I've known and that partake in this story. And it's very important to understand that this is a very critical part of this book. We're not going to the moon and staying there just on our own. It's going to take a massive effort to do it. There's a lot that has to be done, and to do it takes a joint force of people from all over, intelligent people. So that's why I wanted to write the story, because I think I'm reflecting what's really going to happen. As I said, it's a joint venture of NASA and of ESA, but it's also included in that are SpaceX. Everybody knows that name pretty much, and Blue Origin, the two companies that are financially are part of the efforts to go to space now. And so it also helped to create a little, so we say, animosity, because on the base we have the dedicated scientists who are there to do research, and the people that are there that are trying to figure out how are we going to make this profitable to be on the moon. And that's the way it's going to be. It's not going to be straightforward. It won't be a simple matter of just conducting research. For us to live on the moon, it's going to take a lot of money, and there's got to be some way to get a return on that. I would also say that we have to go to the moon. People question whether or not that's the best environment for our future expansion. Well, there's three things I see for our expansion. Is we're going to go underwater into the seas. We're going to go under the earth, which would be kind of, not to, that's going to be limiting. Or we're going to go out to space, and space is wide open. Yes, it seems like the moon is restricted, but it's what we make of it, and we will make something there. I think we will, in order to survive, have to go underground, where we can establish pressurized areas to pressurized oxygen areas, so we can grow plants, grow our food, um, and we'll have animals there, and that's going to be required. So yes, we are going to go underground, but we'll do that on the moon. I see that happening in the future. In fact, I kind of touch on that. I'm writing a sequel to Moonluck. By the way, I didn't even tell you the name of my book, Moonluck. There's a copy I have here with me in Italy. A sequel I'm working on takes place 2 years later and will involve some more science. Let me give it a little bit back on the science as well. The science is, it's not fiction. This book is classified as science fiction, but I did an extensive amount of research to validate what I was going to write about on living on the moon. It's all current science. I think you'll find if you try to find something in what I mentioned is not accurate. Okay, yes, there's going to be some extrapolation, but generally you're going to find the science, particularly on what I talked about growing plants and other elements of living on the moon. I talk about water being there. I talk about minerals, titanium, iron. They're all there. There is water there. Somebody once recently questioned in my book, said, "Oh, we can't live on the moon. There's no water. How are we going to do it without water?" Well, there is water there, and it may be hard to get, but it's there, and it's available on the poles. We're going to be able to survive. We'll have to bring some stuff with us initially, but eventually, I think we're going to be able to transform, as they like to say, terraform part of the moon into something that we can inhabit in due course. It won't be in our lifetimes, but it's going to happen. It's going to need to happen. And I see from somebody's saying hi to me. Hello back. And if you got any questions, by the way, please write your questions. I'd like to be easier for me to answer those than try to go on about talking about my book. But again, I want to get on to the accuracy in the story. One of the things that I did in development, and I did an extensive research and outlining the story before I wrote the first paragraph. For example, I used an Excel spreadsheet to monitor time zones for places taking place, for events that were taking place not only around the Earth but on the moon. But it also can watch when I talk about the phases of the moon. They're accurate. That's what's going to happen in the time frames that I'm talking about. One of the comments, and this is the thing that differs from Star Trek or these other futuristic space shows that you've seen. Communications are not going to be instantaneous. Even to communicate between the Earth and the Moon, there's going to be a several second lag just between the Earth and the Moon. We're talking, I might say about 6 seconds, because I'm allowing for not only the time for the signal travel, but also to be transmitted and go through the processes. So when you speak to somebody, and say I'm speaking now, I won't be able to hear a response for up to 6 seconds. In the very first chapter of my book, I present that of one of the crewmen communicating with his family back on Earth, and there's this time lag. So let me emphasize that people say, "Oh, we think we should be going to Mars where there's at least an atmosphere, and it's similar to Earth." Well, the problem with going to Mars anytime in the near future is, as the planets rotate around the sun, they're not always close. even when they're at their closest, it's almost right now it would be calculated to be 6 to 9 months to get to Mars. What if Mars, when it's going around its orbit, is on the other side of the sun, and we're on this side, and excuse me, your wife's anyway. It's going to take up to 9 months when they're closest, but it could be years to go from Mars back to Earth if there was any sort of emergency, or we try to get into some sort of regular pattern to transport back and forth from the Earth to Moon. So I don't see going to the moon, going to Mars as being our most viable option for exploring. I think it's going to be the moon, and there's argument about that, but that's the way I see it. I also, by the way, in my story, besides our own base station, I expect that the Chinese will have a base station and be operating on the moon as well. In fact, to be brutally honest, it's my belief that Chinese will be there before us, and that will be. Why did we go to the moon in the first place? Way back when we had to beat the Soviet Union in its efforts to go to the moon. So we haven't done anything since then. It's going to take something like China to go to the moon, and then we'll be motivated to do something. Sadly, but that's the way I view it, and I don't get much argument against that. So that's what I see. And let's see, any questions? We get any questions so far? No. All right. Well, let me see. The other thing I wanted to talk about, as I mentioned, the people in my story are reflects the people that I've known and lived and worked with. You will also find it's also my opinion that it's not going to be the effort of just a few people to go to the moon, needless to say. So one of the criticisms that I've received is there's way too many characters in my book, and perhaps that's true for somebody reading a book just for the story. But I think I believe there's 44 characters in my book. So to make people happy, I have a complete glossary in the back with a list of all the prime characters and some of the terms that I do use. Now, I have a question. How do you decide to write about the universe? Well, I'm not really writing about the universe. We are in the universe, but I'm writing about just going to the moon, or I did write about just going to the moon. In my sequel, there is a small discussion about going to Mars, but the focus of my sequel will also be on a base station that's on the moon. Why did I decide to do that? As I mentioned earlier, I think that's because it was a good way for me to bring the characters in my life together in one place that made sense and made for a good story. I've always had, and another point is I've always had fascination, growing up, had fascination with Star Trek and Star Wars and Heinlein's books and Asimov, who wrote some fantastic work. Although they're extremely futuristic, it was still it was something I was involved with. And it says, would you recommend this book for teenagers? Yes. This book, it's good for young adults. There's nothing in it that anybody has to worry about keeping from other people. It's a good, clean story about living together on the moon, about 30 people. Yes, it is a murder mystery, but everybody knows about that. And I think you'll find it's not that terrible of event. Terrible, yes, that somebody gets killed, but I think you'll see if you read the book, it's well explained why it happens. And but absolutely, this would be good for teenagers, for anybody who's looking for the future, uh, where we're going to be. Um, it's definitely it's definitely a clean, nice, good, easy reading book for teenagers. Any other questions on that nature? No. Okay, I'll keep going. What else can I tell you? Oh, they also in my book at the very back, I have a map, if you will, of the location of a base station and the joint venture base station and the Chinese base station, so that you have some concept of where it will be on the moon. Again, I tried to keep this as realistic as possible, explain why we're at those locations. Uh, the other things that I can tell you are that, oh, yeah, something is people have asked. Okay, so I talk about this. They said it was murder mystery. Well, I put this out there. Maybe people who read the book might have an answer. But if somebody were to kill somebody else on the moon, have they violated a law? Have you ever thought about that? There's definitely, I had to do some research to get a decent answer on that, and you'd be surprised. Let's see. Would you like to live there in case Elon makes it possible? I would have no qualms about going there. I mean, I'm 65. I just saw that William Shatner just went into space at the age of 90, and he survived it. He did great. I don't see that actually very likely, though. Maybe in the future it'll be more plausible. Oh, and by the way, this my story is only at this point about 18 years in the future from now, so I see that we'll be there very, very soon. But yeah, I could see myself having the mentality to want to do that. Actually doing it, I don't think we're gonna be there. Although I have to say, I'll say this sequel, in my sequel, which is only 2 years later, so about literally 20 years from now, I'm going to talk about one of the oldest astronauts to go to the moon, and she will be about 73, if I recall in my notes. So yes, it's certainly plausible 20 years from now that people of any age could be living on the moon. I do see that we're going to have, or I anticipate that we will have animals. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in my sequel. The animals will be there both as for pets, and that there may be some call for food production. I think that that there at some point there will be people who will be there will be for families. Initially, nobody will be there longer than say 2 years. They'll be rotating off and on 2 years. Unlike in the Star Trek where they're there on a 5-year mission, which is certainly out there in the future. Initially, nobody's going to be able to last that long. A lot of things happen to the human body when it's out in space, and it actually expands. I don't know if people are aware of that. As much as if I recall correctly, as much as an inch without the force of gravity to keep us down. So there are going to be physical changes to the human body that have to be accounted for. So people initially will be rotating in and out of these base stations. Nobody's going to be there permanently, and that is reflected in my story. But it's still going to be life people living there, living there for 2 years, they're going to have to live their normal lives. And so I'm trying to mix in my story a little bit of what a normal person goes through, along with, well, this new environment that they're in part of. So yes, we're going to be living there, but not initially, not for extended periods. We're going to be there, rotating people in and out. We're going to be doing exploration. We're going to find ways to use what is available on the moon to our advantage, so that we can survive longer. I anticipate that we will have to go underground on the moon and develop facilities so we can pressurize, as I said earlier, so we can have carbon dioxide for the plants, oxygen that will be produced. I see that as happening, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in my second book. That does remind me, though, in my first book, I talked extensively about plants growing on the moon and in the station, and there are 4, as an example. NASA is aware of 19 different species they plan to use. That will not only prolific in generating oxygen, in other words, taking carbon dioxide, converting it, which a plant does, producing oxygen, but also in purifying and detoxifying the air. Plants are actually far more efficient and capable of carrying out these steps than we can do mechanically. So plants are going to be a very, very, very important part of our ability to inhabit the moon in the future. So we've got to make sure that it's capable of containing and holding these plants so they can survive. Is there a book 2 for this? Yes, that's there is a book 2. Basically, it's a sequel 2 years further on. It's not going to be a murder mystery. I've got a whole different approach for the second book, but there'll be some action to keep the suspense going. I like to think of the action as a way to keep the interest of the reader, at the same time talk about the mundane things of living on the moon and what it takes. So the two go hand in hand, so to speak, to keep it going. I see I'm getting close to the end of my period here. Are there any other questions before we go? I don't see any popping up, but I appreciate the few that came in. I hope you will take the time and look and if you read my book. Always, I'm available if you have any questions. Again, it's not science fiction. It's real stuff that's potentially can happen. And as you can hear in the background here in Italy, I've got a church bells going off telling me it's 6 o'clock here in the evening. One last look around here. Let's see if I can get a nice good shot. Oh, here you go. All the sounds. So this is my view here in Italy, and you get to hear the sounds. And let's see if I can show you up there. That's the church. Okay, so enough of that. I think my time is just about up. Any message to humanity? We will survive. There's enough people out there that want it to happen. This is the way it's going to happen. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to have to find other places to live, be it on the moon, be it under the sea, or be it under the earth surface. It's going to happen. We want to take care of ourselves, and we'll survive. Despite all the problems we're having now, it's my very optimistic, but I think realistic belief that we will endure and survive and overcome. I see somebody says to enjoy Italy. I absolutely do and love it. I'm going to be spending more time here. now that I'm retired, and looking forward to having some free time to write my second book. I think my time is up. Let's see if there's any more questions. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and leave it. Let's see. I'll keep influencing. Thank you very much, and I think I'm done. Let's see if I can get that.